Our first speaker is Professor M. Joseph Sirgy. He is a management psychologist and Virginia Tech Real Estate Professor Emeritus of Marketing at the Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University in the USA. He is also an extraordinary professor at the Workwell Research Unit at Northwest University in South Africa. He has published extensively in the areas of marketing, business ethics, quality of life, and well-being. Professor Sirgy is famous for his works on self-concept. He has won several awards, including the International Society for Quality of Life Distinguished Fellow Award, Euromed Management Research Award, the Academy of Marketing Sciences Distinguished Fellow Award, and the Distinguished Quality of Life Researcher Award. Our first speaker will present to us live from the USA. Distinguished guest, please welcome Professor M. Joseph Sirgy. Professor Sirgy, please.
Well, thank you so much for this introduction. And I'm delighted to share some ideas, some of the research that we've done on quality of life and well-being as applied to the hospitality and tourism discipline. The presentation is on applying well-being research in tourism. And specifically, what I'd like to be talking about today is how we can use quality of life indicators as performance metrics in the industry. So this presentation is based on an article that was published back in 2019 with my colleague, Professor Muzaffar Yusal. And it's published in the Annals of Tourism Research. And it is about quality of life indicators as performance measures. So again, I'll be talking about that based on this particular publication. Professor Yusal is a provost professor at University of Massachusetts in Amherst in the United States. And in brief, we can actually summarize the article as quality of life indicators. In that publication, they are reviewed and discussed in relation to 3 selected stakeholders. And we're talking about tourists, residents of the host communities, as well as employees of tourism and hospitality firms. And the article makes specific examples of indicators, again, with very specific case illustrations. And we make the case that there is a reciprocal relationship between conventional performance measures and quality of life indicators. Quality of life indicators assist not only in engaging the level of destination competitiveness, but also in ensuring sustainability of efficient and effective use of resources. So let's talk about some of the sort of the traditional performance measures in tourism. And as you know, I don't need to educate you about that, but the traditional measures are, examples would be number of arrivals, expenditures by visitors, hotel occupancy. Again, these are very commonly used indicators, or which you might call performance measures. As such, the industry has a long tradition in the use of benchmarking through ratio analysis. So what examples of ratio analysis? So we have things like operating ratios, profitability ratios, activity ratios, employee ratios. Again, these are just examples. So these benchmarks are used to compare performance against external industry data. And again, the one that is commonly used is the Smith Travel Research Reports. And destination competitiveness, coming from the World Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Index. So, many of you may be familiar with that index. Quality of life indicators as performance measures are sort of essentially grounded in what you call sustainability measures. So, let's say something about sustainability performance indicators. And again, many of you may be familiar with international entities such as the World Tourism Organization, the European Tourism Commission, and a whole bunch of government tourism offices in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Turkey, and the United Kingdom. Again, these entities, these organizations, they issue reports and manuals on sustainable tourism with best practices to guide sustainable practices. And as you may actually know, the Institute for Sustainable Futures developed a suite of performance indicators to measure the Australian tourism industry at the national level. Again, this is an example of what you call sustainability indicators as performance measures. When it comes to the United Nations, we have the United Nations World Tourism Organization. And again, there is a suite of measures as performance indicators capturing sustainable tourism. And again, this slide shows you sociocultural indicators related to community well-being, cultural assets, community participation, tourist satisfaction. Again, these are examples of sociocultural indicators. Economic indicators would be things related to benefits, sustaining the tourist product, seasonality, leakages, etc. Environmental indicators are related to the protection of valuable natural assets, managing environmental resources such as water, energy, and waste, etc. Tourism planning and management indicators related to destination planning, design of products and services, controlling use intensity, transport, marketing, again, a whole bunch of those. Responding to global indicators, again, are related to climate change, epidemics. I talk about, COVID as an instance, sex tourism, and again, a bunch of what you call global disasters. Maybe that's a better way of actually putting it. So that sort of gives you the background in which that would allow us to talk about quality of life indicators as performance measures. And again, we divide those in terms of three different stakeholders. You've got the tourists as one stakeholder, you got host communities as another stakeholders, and then you've got employees in tourism and hospitality firms as still yet another stakeholders. So these are essentially the three major ones. Focusing on tourists as a stakeholders, the performance measures that we use as quality of life indicators are based on two popular theories in quality of life studies, and these are bottom-up spillover theory and need hierarchy theory. Probably some of you may be familiar with need hierarchy theory because, again, it's based on a very popular management model as articulated by Abraham Maslow, a motivational psychologist, where he, again, divides needs in terms of basic needs and growth needs. And the idea then, again, I'm looking at the bottom part of the slide, the idea is that a tourism service, whatever the service might be, or a tourism attraction, the extent to which it would satisfy basic and growth needs of tourists, and again, basic needs would be physiological, economic, and social needs. When it comes to growth needs would be needs related to self-esteem, self-actualization, knowledge, beauty, and so forth. Again, you'll be able to capture the satisfaction of those needs, then that can be construed as a performance metrics based on, again, need hierarchy theory. Now, bottom-up spillover theory is a little bit more, you talk about satisfaction in some very specific tourist-related events, and these sort of trickle up all the way up to in the way it influenced life satisfaction. So it's a bottom-up spillover of satisfaction with trip services like pre-trip, en route, destination, and return trip. These are some very specific facets of the tourist trip. And ultimately, that kind of satisfaction trickle up, bottom up. It goes and influences satisfaction with travel and tourism services overall, which in turn, influences satisfaction with travel tourism experiences, all the way up to satisfaction with leisure life. And again, the very top of the pyramid in that hierarchy is satisfaction with life. So again, the idea is how satisfaction with very specific aspects or facets of tourism services affects something like life satisfaction. So the model and the performance metrics is based on this idea that satisfaction trickles up in its terms of influence from very specific life events as experienced by the tourist, all the way up to life satisfaction at large. So shifting focus, what are those performance metrics related to the host communities? And in that context, we make a distinction between outcome indicators and process indicators. Let me give you examples of what those outcome indicators in the context of a community setting. So in that context, we break things down in terms of economic well-being, consumer well-being, environmental well-being, and social well-being. And the indicators, what you call performance metrics, for economic well-being would be things like median wage in the area, median household income in the area. What's the area? We're talking about the area being the destination, the tourism destination area. Unemployment in the area, percentage of unskilled workers in the area, literacy rate in the area. Consumer well-being would be things like cost of living in the area, price of goods and services in the area, cost of land and housing in the area, property taxes, number of retail stores. When it comes to environmental well-being, again, some of the performance metrics would be land pollution, air pollution, water pollution, crowdedness, traffic congestion. Again, these are examples of performance metrics there. Social well-being would be things like educational attainment, crime rate, quality of public transportation system, the number of recreational parks and programs in the area, housing quality, and so forth. So these are, again, examples of what we call outcome indicators. Sometimes we talk about them as outputs. So again, from a systems point of view, talk about inputs versus outputs. So sometimes we talk about them as process versus outcome indicators. So these are examples of outcome indicators. When it comes to process indicators, or what you call input, again, we break things down in terms of process indicators related to tourists, host communities, and hospitality firms, and to give you examples of what those inputs or process indicators related to tourists would be things like number of visitors who have registered in the area tourist destination, area versus out of area visitors, number of tourism sites in the area. Again, these would be examples of performance indicators. When it comes to the host community, things like tax revenue from the hospitality tourism related firms, percentage public sector spending from tax revenues derived from the hospitality tourism related firms, percentage of tax revenues, percentage of sales of hospitality tourism related area, percentage of leakage due imported goods from outside, percentage of public money spent on recreation and tourism infrastructure improvement and facilities in the area. And finally, when you have quality of life dimensions, or again, translated into indicators related to the hospitality firms, again, would be things like dollar sales of hospitality tourism related firms, and area versus out of area visitors. Again, these are examples of what you call performance metrics that capture, again, in the context of host communities, that capture what we call process indicators, or another term for it would be input indicators. Finally, if we focus on performance indicators related to employees that are working in hospitality firms, again, a very popular measure that has gained quite a bit of use in the travel tourism industry is a measure which is called quality of work life. And that has been applied again in travel and tourism in a variety of settings, in a variety of venues. And this particular measure breaks things down in terms of how the hotel, for example, the hospitality firm, whatever it is, would satisfy employees' needs in terms of, again, familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, I mean, it would be things like health and safety needs, economic and family needs, social needs, actualization needs, knowledge needs, and needs related to aesthetics and creativity. So again, the extent to which the hospitality firm satisfies employees' needs in terms of, again, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these set of needs that can be, again, fleshed out in terms of the pyramid, going for the very basic needs all the way to, again, at the top of the pyramid being something like, again, self-actualization, or the needs for knowledge, the need for creativity and aesthetics. So that sort of gives you an idea of how we use quality of life indicators as applied to, again, three different stakeholders: the tourist as one stakeholder, host communities, and employees of tourism and hospitality firms. So that's the sort of the gist or a summary of this publication using quality of life indicators as performance metrics in the tourism industry. If you know, some of the citations that I have on the slides are based on those references, based on my work and my colleagues. And again, these are the examples of references that, if you're interested in performance indicators and quality of life indicators, these specific references may help you. So if you might be interested in this presentation, don't hesitate to, again, send me a message, an email asking for the slides, and I would be more than happy to share those slides with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Sirgy, for your insightful presentation. We have a few minutes for Q&A. For our participants in-house, if you have a question, kindly raise your hand and the microphones will be passed on to you. For our participants online, please type your questions in the chat session.
Professor Sirgy, this is Kay Chan. I'm very proud that you are my professor and I was your student, and you are my PhD thesis co-supervisor. Thank you very much, first of all, for staying so late. I suppose you are in Blacksburg, Virginia. So that means you are 9:30 p.m. Your research was more on self-concept and self-congruity, and then now you have switched to more the quality of life and well-being research. So can you shed a light on the connection between two areas of growth research you have conducted, self-concept and now to QOL? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Professor Chan. By the way, yes, I'm very proud of you graduating, you know, your PhD from Virginia Tech, and my role in your career development. So I'm very proud to be associated with you, and many of the accomplishments. Your accomplishments are just I can't say enough about your accomplishments. So again, I'm very proud of your accomplishments. But going back to your question, yes, there is a connection between self-concept and what we call the theory of self-congruity and well-being research in travel and tourism. And the connection is pretty simple, and that is for those tourists that experience self-congruity, and self-congruity is the match between the tourist's self-concept, and we break the self-concept in terms of the actual self, the ideal self, the social self, and the ideal social self, and the image associated with the tourist destination. For those tourists that experience self-congruity, and we documented this in several studies, they experience quite a bit of not only satisfaction with the tourist destination, but it also feeds into their life satisfaction, or what we call quality of life. So compared to some of the other models associated with how people make decisions and how you become satisfied with certain aspects of the destination, if there is that match between the tourist self-concept and the image associated with the destination, and the image associated with the destination is what is the stereotypic image associated with the kind of people that visit this kind of destination. And if there's this kind of match, then it really contributes to a great deal of happiness, a great deal of satisfaction that contributes to the tourist's life satisfaction and their own well-being and quality of life. That's the sort of a brief answer to that question. Thank you for asking it, by the way.
Okay, thank you very much. Please, do we have any more questions? Okay, if not, thank you, Professor Chon, for your question. Again, thank you, Professor Sirgy, for your presentation and contribution to this conference.